They didn't come with a warning. No massive fleet entering the solar system. No broadcast message. No demands or greetings or war chants. Just silence. Silence and vanishing stations. Entire orbital networks went dark. Mining rigs on the edge of Neptune stopped transmitting. Luna colonies lost power. Mars went quiet within a single rotation. By the time Earth noticed, the damage had already begun. And then, something came into orbit. It wasn't metal. It wasn't fire and rage and noise like the old invasion movies. It was quiet, clean, precise. A single ship, obsidian black, drifting above the Pacific with no movement. No heat. No visible weapons. Just hovering. Watching. People gathered on rooftops. They streamed it live, joked about alien TikToks, said it was marketing for a new space show. But the military wasn't laughing. Not when the ship refused to answer. Not when their satellites failed to track its origin. Not when it turned their nukes to vapor without even firing a shot. It just pulsed. Like a heartbeat. A low throb of blue light from its underside. Every time it pulsed, electronics across the globe stuttered. Aircraft rerouted. Submarines surfaced, blind and helpless. And every time humanity tried to touch it, drones, missiles, even a simple weather balloon, it reacted the same way. Plasma. Not fire. Not explosions. Just precise, humming beams of controlled plasma that never missed, never wasted energy, never caused a single civilian death. But it always sent a message. Stay back. You're not ready. For 3 days, no contact. No retaliation. No destruction either. Cities waited. Armies prepared. Civilians prayed or rioted or filmed themselves pretending to be ambassadors. And then the ship spoke. Not in sound. Not in any Earth language. Not even in images. It spoke in light. They called it the pattern. A wave of pulses across the sky. It stretched like an aurora but moved like language. Experts, cryptographers, even school teachers tried to understand it. And somehow one girl, 12 years old, hearing impaired, recognized a sequence in the pulses. It matched the beat of a childhood lullaby. One used to teach rhythm through touch. That's when it clicked. They weren't just showing off. They were waiting. Waiting for us to answer. The United Nations held an emergency summit. For once, every nation agreed on one thing. If this was a test, they had to pass it. But it couldn't be solved by weapons or bravado. Not this time. This wasn't a war of tanks and drones. It was something older. Something harder. A war of understanding. They built a team. Scientists, musicians, codebreakers, veterans who'd survived psychic shock trauma, poets who remembered the world before AI did the writing, people who'd seen too much, or just enough. No politicians, no generals, only those who'd actually listened when others spoke. They met in an old observatory in the Andes. Cold, quiet, shielded from EM interference. The first true decoding of the pattern happened there. Not by the top minds, but by a former jazz pianist turned software engineer who recognized a recursive beat hidden between light frequencies. The pattern wasn't just a message. It was a map. Not to stars, but to memories, human ones. They were using our own signals, our own broadcasts, filtered, refracted, remixed. TV static. Whale songs. Morse code. Old space mission audio. The invaders were talking to us through our own forgotten language. And someone somewhere had to answer. The team chose one person to respond. He wasn't the smartest, wasn't the strongest, but he understood pain. He had a voice that trembled when he spoke of loss. And they needed a voice like that. Something human. Something real. His message was simple. We hear you. We don't understand. But we're trying. Please, try too. For the first time the ship moved. Not to fire. Not to flee. It descended. Not to a base or government facility. But to the middle of the Pacific, just off a refugee boat drifting without power. Witnesses said it hovered over the vessel for exactly 90 seconds. Then it released something. A box. The ship vanished an hour later. Gone without a trace. No sound. No signal. No pulse. And the box, it was locked from the inside. No one could open it. It was inert. Smooth. Seamless. Military labs failed. Private tech firms failed. Even AI models couldn't predict its material composition. But someone figured it out. A child again. A refugee who'd been on the boat. She touched the box with both hands and whispered a word. Together. The box opened. Inside, plasma. Pure, floating plasma swirling like mist caught in wind. Not hot. Not dangerous. Just waiting. They analyzed it. studied it, but none of the tools worked, until someone thought to sing. And the plasma responded. It formed shapes, sounds. It shimmered with memories, not just images but feelings. A mother's embrace, a soldier's goodbye, a laugh from a long-lost friend. The plasma stored something impossible. Human emotion. It wasn't a weapon. It was a mirror. And whatever had sent it, whatever had tested us, wasn't here to destroy. It was here to judge. But judgment didn't come fast. The ship returned weeks later. This time in orbit. Silent again. But it wasn't alone. Other ships followed. Dozens. Then hundreds. They hung above Earth like a second sky. No attack. No movement. Just watching. And the plasma began to change. It took shapes. Showed visions. War. Extinction. Triumph. The rise and fall of civilizations. Some human. Some not. It showed planets drowning. Cities in flame. Others in peace. It showed us what we might become. Or what we might destroy. The team realized something horrifying. These weren't visions of the past. They were choices. Futures. A test far beyond any language. A test of soul. And that's when the disappearances began again. But this time not stations. Not satellites. People. One by one across the globe. Gone. No pattern. No trace. Not even a scream. Just absence. A father tucking his child into bed. A scientist leaving the lab. A woman whispering goodbye before boarding a train. Vanished. Only one thing remained behind each time. A flicker of plasma in the air. And a single word, spoken in their voice. Remember. The panic returned. Riots. Desperation. Cults rising around the lights in the sky. Governments threatening retaliation. Earth turned on itself faster than it had in centuries. Because deep down, everyone feared the same thing. That the judgment wasn't coming. It had already started. And then the final signal came. Not a pulse. Not a map. But a sound. A deep, haunting sound. Not mechanical. Not alien. A heartbeat. It echoed across every device. Every speaker. Even those unplugged. Even the deaf said they felt it. Like thunder in the bones. Like a voice that wasn't speaking words but something deeper. A warning. The team gathered in silence. The plasma box began to crack. And from inside, a human face began to form. Someone who had vanished. Someone they thought lost. Eyes closed. Breathing steady. And as the figure solidified, one of the researchers, an old man who'd once built satellites in his youth, took a step forward and whispered, "That's my son." The face opened its eyes. And they weren't human anymore. Not completely. Not yet. He didn't blink. The face, so familiar yet slightly wrong, just stared back at them through the haze of swirling plasma. There were no words. No movement. Just those eyes glowing faintly locked on the old man. He stepped closer, trembling. He whispered the name again. But the face didn't react. It only studied him like a stranger looking through a photograph, trying to recognize something lost. Around them the rest of the team stood frozen. No one breathed. No one dared speak. The researcher's hands slowly reached toward the glass-like edge of the box. He didn't know what he was doing. He didn't care. It had been 10 years since his son had disappeared, lost in a field operation overseas, presumed dead. There hadn't even been a body. Just a folded flag and an empty grave. Now he was here. Or something wearing his face. As the man's fingers touched the side of the box, the plasma shimmered. Warmth spread through the air. And for just a second, the lights in the observatory flickered. The floor hummed. Then the voice came. Not from the box. Not from any speaker. From inside their heads. A whisper. Soft. Barely more than a breath. "We were waiting." The researcher stumbled back, falling to his knees. Others rushed to him, but he waved them off, wide-eyed. "Did you hear that?" he asked. They all had. The plasma pulsed again, and the face within it slowly began to dissolve. Not like melting, but like smoke caught in the wind. Within seconds it was gone. In its place floated a different shape. A planet. But changed. The land masses were wrong. The oceans too shallow. There were no cities. No lights. Just wilderness. And above it, in orbit, hundreds of ships just like the ones now looming above their real sky. One of the linguists stepped forward, her voice trembling. "Is it showing us the future again?" No one answered. Someone else muttered, "Why would it take his son's face?" No one answered that either. But deep down most of them already knew. The ships weren't just testing language or behavior. They were testing something harder to define. Memory. Emotion. Loss. what made them human, and maybe what they'd done with those things. In the days that followed, the plasma grew more active. It started responding without touch or sound. Some thought it was reading brainwaves. Others said it was reacting to emotion. One night, it showed something no one was ready for. War. But not alien war. Earth's wars. It played footage. Audio. Things not even in public record. Genocides long buried. Drone strikes from classified missions. Torture. Greed. Betrayals between nations, between people. And then it showed faces. The missing ones. The people taken. Each one stood in silence, watching the footage with blank eyes. None of them looked older. None of them spoke. But every one of them had been judged. And now were being used as mirrors. One of the team members broke down screaming. She had recognized her sister in one of the faces. A woman taken in a factory protest 5 years earlier. She hadn't known she was missing. That changed everything. This wasn't random. They weren't just taking leaders, thinkers, or chosen ones. They were taking people tied to memory, to unresolved emotion, to connections, and using them to reflect something back at the world. The observatory became a fortress. Not by choice. Outside, panic spread. Videos leaked. People saw the ships, the plasma, the box. Conspiracy theories exploded. Some said it was humanity's reckoning. Others called it a cosmic reset. A few believed it was the end of time itself, unraveling backwards. But inside, the team kept working. And every day the plasma changed again. One morning it showed something no one had seen before. Not Earth. Not war. But a city. Alien. Built from glass and magnetism. Floating towers. Streets that shifted with the wind. Creatures, tall, graceful, walking on limbs that folded and stretched like light. And in the center, a monument made of plasma. The same plasma. And at its base, human bones. Not many. Just a handful. But recognizable. Skulls. Ribs. Fragments of gear with English lettering. And on the monument, etched in lines of pure energy, were symbols that almost looked like words. Not any known language, but structured. Organized. One of the translators murmured, "It's not a city. It's a grave. A memory grave. A record of those who came before." But no one could tell if they were honored or punished. And that's when something new happened. A second box arrived. Not from orbit. From the sea. It surfaced just off the Chilean coast, glowing faintly. Fishermen found it floating, warm to the touch. This one wasn't locked. It opened on its own the moment the first human touched it. Inside, a sphere. Metallic. Dull gray. But not cold. When they brought it back to the observatory, it did nothing for hours. Then it hummed. A single tone. Not music. Not static. A heartbeat again. But faster. Urgent. The sphere pulsed, and inside it they saw something that turned their blood cold. Present day. Real time. But only one continent. Africa. And across it, spreading like ink in water, black shapes. Moving. The satellite feed failed. The sphere showed them what the sky no longer could. An invasion. Not fire. Not bombs. Just erasure. Buildings vanishing. Roads gone. Entire forests folded into themselves like paper burning in reverse. And in their place, more ships. Smaller. Faster. Different from the ones in orbit. Autonomous. Not judging. Consuming. One of the techs shouted, "This isn't part of the test. This is something else." And the plasma pulsed in agreement. For the first time it showed fear. They thought the invaders were one species. One force. One agenda. They were wrong. Whatever had sent the first ship, whatever had asked for understanding, was not the same as the ones now devouring the Earth. There were others. And they had no interest in judgment. Only absorption. The team divided. Some believed they should send a message. Beg for help. Plead with the watchers in orbit to intervene. Others believed they were the cause, and this was their way of cleansing the failure. But then the third box arrived. No ship. No ocean. It just appeared. Right in the observatory without warning. No sound. No light. Just a shift in the air and it was there. Smaller than the others. A cube. Darker. Almost invisible unless the light caught it just right. And it didn't open. It spoke. Only 2 words. You choose. No one knew what it meant. At first. Then the plasma reacted again. It split. Half of it floated toward one side of the room. The other half drifted toward the opposite wall. Each side began showing visions. Different futures. On the left, survival. A world rebuilt. Cities powered by plasma. Children playing beneath skies lit with alien light. No weapons. No war. But at a cost. Human autonomy was gone. No governments. No countries. No choice. Only guidance. A perfect cage. On the right, resistance. A world scarred. Cities in ruin. People huddled in bunkers. But free. Struggling. Making mistakes. But making their own decisions. And the plasma box spoke again. You choose. The team argued for hours. One side wanted peace. Safety. A chance to live even if it meant being kept like animals. The other side refused to kneel. They would die human or not die at all. But the choice wasn't for the team alone. Because outside the black shapes were spreading. Entire cities gone. And Earth's sky was beginning to change. The ships in orbit moved. Not toward the Earth. But away. Not fast. But slow enough to feel like disappointment. Like they'd seen the answer already. And had chosen not to interfere. One of the youngest team members, a student intern who had barely spoken all week, stood up. She looked at both halves of the plasma. Then at the cube. She said nothing. She walked to the middle of the room. And she whispered, "There has to be another way." The cube pulsed once. And the sphere shattered. A single shard embedded itself in the floor, humming like a trapped thought. And the plasma began to pull inward, like breath being held. For the first time it showed nothing. No future. No war. Just darkness. And the sound of something approaching. Not from space. From inside the Earth. Something waking up. And then the whisper returned. Every member of the team heard it. This time it wasn't in their heads. It was everywhere. Choose. Or be chosen. And the room went cold. The ground shook. The stars outside the observatory windows flickered. And in the shadows someone, or something, moved. Someone they thought had vanished. Someone who hadn't been taken. Someone who had never existed before. They stepped into the light. And every face in the room turned to look. But no one spoke. Because this time they weren't staring at plasma. They were staring at a mirror. And the reflection was moving on its own. No one moved. The figure in the light didn't say a word. They just stood there, quiet and still, as if waiting for someone else to speak first. But the silence stretched too long. Too heavy. The only sound was the low hum of the broken sphere, and the sharp, nervous breaths of those still trying to believe what they were seeing. It wasn't just a reflection. It looked human. But there was something off, like it had been shaped by memory instead of biology. Its skin didn't hold light the right way. Its eyes didn't blink. And the way it moved, it was too smooth. Too patient. Like it wasn't alive in the way they understood. The old researcher stepped forward, heart pounding in his chest. "Who are you?" he asked, voice hoarse. "Why are you here?" The figure turned to him. And for a second its face changed. It became the son he had lost. Not just the face but the exact moment. The last moment he had ever seen him. Blood in his hair. Dirt on his skin. The same confused, broken expression. It held there. Let the father feel it. Then shifted again. Another face. This time the young intern's sister. Then someone else. Then someone no one recognized. The figure wasn't one person. It was all of them. One of the team whispered, "It's not here to answer. It's here to show us." And it did. Without a word, it raised one hand, and the walls of the observatory vanished. Not crumbled. Not exploded. They simply weren't there anymore. The team was still standing but everything else was gone. Replaced by sky and ash. Above them the stars. Below, a vast stretch of blackened earth, cracked and glowing like embers in a dying fire. It wasn't a vision. It was real. Somehow they had been moved, or everything else had. Across the horizon something crawled. Not fast. Not slow. But unstoppable. A wave of nothing. Not a machine. Not a storm. Something worse. Absence. As if space itself was being eaten away one heartbeat at a time. And above it, high in the sky, the ships that once hovered peacefully now turned. Their undersides opened. For the first time they revealed weapons. Not bombs. Not lasers. But light. Pure, silent light that burned shadows into the ground from miles away. But they didn't fire. They waited. And the team understood why. Because whatever was crawling across the earth wasn't part of their plan. It was something else. Something older. Maybe something they had unleashed by accident. Or maybe something that had always been there, waiting for the right kind of failure. The intern grabbed the old researcher's arm. "We need to get back inside." "There is no inside," he said quietly. She looked again, and the ground beneath their feet cracked. From the split a sound rose. Like a scream but not made by lungs or throat. It was mechanical, alien, like the grinding of dead stars. The figure, the mirror, watched it come, detached, but not uncaring. It turned back to the team and pointed to the cube that had reappeared, floating where the observatory once stood. It still read the same two words. You choose. And suddenly they understood what the choice really was. It wasn't between peace and resistance. It was between intervention and silence. If they chose to act, the ships might help. Might stop the crawling nothing from consuming the world. But the cost? Control. Humanity would be saved but not trusted. Guided. Watched. Changed. If they chose silence, the ships would leave. And humanity would face the dark alone. Maybe win. Maybe not. But remain free. It wasn't a test of intelligence. It was a test of will. The researcher dropped to one knee. He felt the heat rising from the cracks. Felt the pulse in the air. Felt his heart hammering inside his chest like it was trying to claw its way out. And he remembered his son. The last letter. The voice on the call. The hope that he'd come home. He hadn't. And now here they were. At the edge of everything. The team gathered around the cube. It didn't move. Didn't rush them. Just waited. Waiting for them to prove something. Maybe to themselves. One of the scientists shouted over the rising wind, "We need to vote." But the others shook their heads. There was no time. The choice wasn't one of democracy. It was personal. One by one each person stepped up to the cube. Not speaking. Just touching it. When they did, the cube lit up, briefly showing them something no one else could see. The intern touched it last. And collapsed. Her eyes wide. Tears on her face. Whispering something no one could hear. The mirror caught her before she hit the ground. Cradled her like a child. Gently. And then disappeared. Not walked away. Just gone. Along with her. The cube turned black. And the earth groaned. The sky split in two. One half still stars, the other half a void that pulsed and crawled. They had chosen. But what choice had they made? No one knew. The box said nothing now. The ships above began to move again. And something else moved with them. Something they hadn't seen before. From behind the original formation of orbiting ships, a shape emerged. Massive. Not a vessel. Not a weapon. A being. Larger than cities. Silent. Ancient. It didn't look like a creature or a god. It looked like an answer. One none of them could understand. The researcher dropped to his knees again. His voice broke as he whispered, "What did we do?" Because he knew, whatever happened next, was no longer about just surviving. It was about proving that they deserved to. The wind tore through what was left of the world. And somewhere far beyond the sky, something woke up. Not the ships. Not the void. Something watching them both. And it was coming. Fast. Not to destroy. Not to save. But to witness the end of the question. What are humans worth, when they have nothing left to offer but themselves? And still the box waited. Black. Silent. But not gone. The answer was coming. And it would be made of choices. Or the lack of them. The sky didn't stay cracked. It began to heal. But not like a wound closing. It moved in reverse like time was folding back in on itself. The stars that had disappeared started returning one by one, as if whatever force had been eating space was now spitting it back out. No one spoke. No one could. The team stood in stunned silence, watching the impossible rewrite itself. But the silence broke when the cube turned white again. A cold, sterile white. Not light. Not warmth. Just blankness. It pulsed once. Then again. Each time, a louder hum filled the air as if it were preparing to say something. Or warn them. But what came next wasn't a message. It was a second cube. It emerged from beneath the ground, pushing through the cracked dirt like a seed that had waited too long to sprout. Its surface was smooth and flawless but darker, deep gray, nearly black. As it rose beside the first cube, the air around it shimmered. Not with heat. With pressure. And then, without any warning, both cubes lifted off the ground, hovering just a few feet above the surface, facing one another like two sides of a coin. The old researcher stepped back, chest tight. There wasn't supposed to be two, he whispered. There was never two. But the second cube pulsed. And this time it spoke, not in sound but directly into their minds. The words didn't hurt. They weren't loud. They just felt final. You chose what you thought was a test. But the real test begins now. They didn't understand. Not yet. Until the second cube showed them a new memory. Not a vision. Not a prediction. A memory that didn't belong to them. But it was human. Somehow. It showed a future. One where humanity survived the first wave, where they had rejected the ships, fought the creeping void with their own strength, unified, sacrificed. One. It was brutal, bloody, but they endured. And then, the ships returned. Not as saviors, as rivals, because in that future humans had done what none of the others had managed. They had grown stronger through suffering. And the ships, those silent observers who only ever offered help with a cost, had come back afraid. Afraid of what humanity had become. Afraid of what they would become again. And the second cube made it clear. The first cube offered survival. But the second? The second offered freedom, at a price so high no one could truly measure it. Because the path of the second cube didn't protect people. It forced them to earn every inch of survival. There would be no return to safety. No alliances. No guidance. Only fight after fight. Only fire. Only loss. But it would be theirs. The researcher looked at the team. His voice cracked when he said, "It's not just about saving the species." They looked back, eyes wide with a new kind of fear. It's about shaping what we become. And somewhere above, as the skies finished stitching themselves back together, the ships began to move again. Not all of them. Some stayed. Others turned away, as if acknowledging the second cube's challenge. But the figure, the mirror, the one who had taken the intern, returned. This time it looked like none of them. Its face was clean, smooth. Not human. Not alien. Just a face. Like it had forgotten how to be anything else. It reached out, touching both cubes at once. And then it changed again. This time its body fractured into two forms. One turned toward the white cube, the other to the black. And for the first time it spoke aloud. You can't choose both. It was then the earth began to rumble, not from below but from above. Because something else was falling. Not a meteor. Not a ship. Something worse. A piece of the void. Not empty, but alive. It wasn't crashing, it was landing. It had seen the cubes. It had heard the choice. And it had made one of its own. It wasn't here to stop the choice. It was here to feed from it. The cubes began to spin. Fast. Too fast. The two mirror forms began flickering as if they couldn't exist at the same time. And in that moment they understood the second twist. The choice hadn't just been between two paths. It was between two futures. And both futures now existed, side by side. But only one could survive. Whichever cube they touched now wouldn't offer a future. It would erase the other. Forever. The intern reappeared. She was screaming. But not in fear. In warning. No. They're not opposites, they're mirrors. You touch one and it destroys the reflection, not the source. She fell to her knees. Don't choose wrong. Don't. The ground exploded beside her as the fallen void beast tore into reality. It didn't roar. Didn't growl. It simply expanded. A maw of lightless hunger that devoured color, sound, even thought. The two mirror forms turned to the team. And both spoke together. This is the cost of looking too far ahead. The old researcher's knees buckled. He whispered, "We were never supposed to choose." But it was too late for that. They already had. Now they had to survive it. Or make sure something human did. Even if it wasn't them. The void beast kept growing. And the sky bled static. Above them, the last ship that hadn't fled began to descend. Not to fight, but to watch. And the final pulse of the black cube echoed through every mind on the planet. One flame or 1,000 sparks. But not both. The world held its breath. And the story teetered on the edge. The ground shook beneath their feet as the void beast stretched its shadow over everything. It was no longer just a creature. It was a force, a living silence that swallowed light and hope. The team stood on the cracked earth, hearts pounding, the weight of the two cubes heavy in the air. The white cube pulsed steadily, calm and measured. The black cube spun wildly, fierce and unpredictable. Both held a future, both held a fate, but only one could live. The intern's voice broke through the chaos. We have to stop it. If we pick a side, the beast consumes the other. But what if we don't choose? The researcher shook his head. The cubes demand it. They're linked to the beast. The moment we decide, everything else collapses. No one moved. Time slowed as they faced the impossible choice. One cube promised survival, steady, cautious, but at a cost to freedom. The other promised freedom, but only through unending struggle, loss, and fire. The beast's maw widened, darkness bleeding into the world like a stain. The sky flickered as stars blinked out, and the last ship hovered silently, waiting. The team looked at each other, every face a mixture of fear, hope, and something harder, determination. The intern stepped forward. What if we don't destroy one? What if we merge them? The researcher frowned. Impossible. The cubes are opposite forces. Together, they would tear each other apart. But if the beast feeds on their opposition, she said, voice shaking, maybe bringing them together is the only way to starve it. They hesitated, but the beast moved closer, closer than ever before, its hunger palpable. With no time left, the intern reached out, her fingers trembling, and touched both cubes at once. The air exploded. Light and shadow spiraled into a vortex that stretched across the sky. The beast screamed, not in sound but in the tearing of reality. It faltered, shrinking as the cubes merged, their white and black surfaces melting into a strange new silver glow. A pulse radiated outward, a wave of warmth and cold, of light and darkness balanced. The void beast screamed again, then vanished as if it had been undone from existence itself. The sky calmed, stars returning to their rightful places. The team collapsed, gasping, tears streaming down faces that had known too much pain and fear. It was over. But then the silver cube pulsed once more. A voice filled their minds, not cold or harsh but familiar. Human. We are not just one or the other. The intern's eyes widened. The researcher whispered, it's us. The cube was not just a choice. It was a mirror of humanity's dual nature, strength and vulnerability, fire and plasma, chaos and order. And then the final pulse came, not a warning but a question. Are you ready to become more than survival? To be whole? They looked at each other, hearts still racing. The journey was only beginning. But for the first time they knew one truth. Humanity didn't need to bow to fireballs or plasma alone. They could be both. And that made all the difference. The screen of the sky flickered once more. And somewhere, deep in the silent stars, a new story waited to be written. The end? Or just the beginning? The silver light faded slowly, leaving the world bathed in a calm that felt almost unnatural after the chaos. The air no longer trembled with the weight of the cubes or the shadow of the void beast. Instead, there was a quiet hum, a gentle reminder that something profound had shifted beneath their feet. The team remained where they had fallen, catching their breath and exchanging glances that said more than words ever could. There was relief, yes, but also an undeniable sense of awe. They had touched the edge of something far greater than themselves. They had seen a future where humanity could be something new, something whole. The intern wiped her tears away, still trembling from the raw emotions that had swept over her. We didn't just survive, she whispered, voice breaking. We became more. Together. The researcher nodded slowly. The cubes? They were never about choosing one path or another. They were about understanding who we really are, both fragile and strong, cautious and bold. Around them, the sky brightened with dawn's first light. The stars faded into the morning blue, but their shimmer lingered in the hearts of everyone watching. The stars reminded them that no matter how dark the void, light could always find its way back. Questions that had once seemed impossible to answer now felt clearer. The mysterious ships, the Watchers, were not just observers waiting for humanity to fail or succeed. They were guardians of potential, testaments to the infinite possibilities that lay ahead. Why did they choose us? One of the team members asked quietly. Because we have fire and plasma inside us, the intern replied, smiling softly. We carry both destruction and creation. We are the balance. The old researcher chuckled, despite the exhaustion weighing on his shoulders. Maybe that's what scares the Watchers most. Not our strength, but our spirit. Our ability to change, to grow beyond the limits they imagined. As the sun climbed higher, the last ship finally lifted off, disappearing into the horizon. It was a silent farewell, a promise that the Watchers would return when humanity was ready for the next chapter. But that next chapter would be written by humanity itself. They stood, steady now, ready to face the world with new eyes. The scars of the past would not be forgotten, but they would no longer define their future. The team looked toward the horizon, knowing the true battle wasn't against outside forces, but within themselves. The intern's voice carried a quiet strength. It's not about fireballs or plasma. It's about what we do with the power inside us. Together. The researcher smiled, eyes shining. That's the full HFY story. Not about destruction, but about hope. About becoming more than survival. Becoming humanity. And as the wind carried the soft sounds of a waking world, they knew the story would never truly end. Because the fire inside was eternal. And so was the plasma. Together they burned brighter than any star.